Hello, hi, this is David. Today we're going to look at contraception. This isn't for everyone by any means. The average person, I just don't think they could grasp this or even want it. I'm looking for people who have the Spirit of God who are open minded, and liberalism is not. They're closed minded, and so this information is for people who have the Spirit of God working in their hearts, and that's it. I mean, this is that kind of a doctrine. It's hard to imagine, in fact, a doctrine more deadly than the liberal belief that contraception should be legal. But the modern belief is that technology has done away with God, that now man has outsmarted God. And all of these sins have started for many liberal beliefs and reasons, and one of which is the effects of the doctrine of original sin have been lost in this modern world and at times throughout history. Having said this, it's hard to imagine a doctrine more firmly grounded, but so firmly opposed in so many passages of Scripture than this doctrine that unborn and born babies who die will be judged. And unless faith is present, eternal damnation awaits them. As I said, this isn't for everyone. And so, if you want to hear according to your itching ears, this isn't the place. I don't get paid. I haven't received a penny for this. And I face persecution in what I'm putting on online here all the time. And so that's just the way it is. And I invite you to go on to somewhere else if you don't want to hear this stuff. And it is an unstated truth that if you mention this in the workplace, in fact, your job is at stake, along with so many liberal beliefs and practices today. Have you been fired because of your religious beliefs? Well, and this I will explain in the upcoming video too, replete with Bible verses proving beyond doubt, time and time again, that babies are and will be held accountable, in spite of what practically every denomination believes today, and they just ignore these passages. The curse in the garden was man has to work in the sweat of his brow, and women have to bear children and are to fill the earth. Both curses are done away with in a communist nation like America, where freely you have received and freely give is also against the law. And so liberals try to avoid suffering, force you not only to serve or give to others, but to avoid suffering, especially that of bearing lots of children, even though the command of God it's right there to fill the earth. Yet, for a Christian woman, having children is in a sense more sought after than a husband. 1 Samuel chapter 1, verse 8. For God formed her body and her psyche to bear children, and the will of God is for a man to work the soil. And the resulting curse, for this is how God created the male and the female. Yet liberals try to do away with these sufferings and punishments for sin, so they have formulated the religious belief of evolutionism to discount Genesis chapters 1 through 3. They preach the world is overpopulated to do away with the curse of having to bear children. Now, serving God is not having many children, and it's using contraception. Then they have institutionalized childbirth to make it near to impossible to bear a child. Now it costs about $25,000 on average. Next, they produce the impossible belief of equality to encourage women to work. Cheap labor for corporate America any way they can get it. And at the same time, corporate American legislators have pushed for housing assistance, food stamps, free health care, because they dislike paying the illegal families and women a living wage, cheap labor. Ever since America has allowed corporations into this nation after the Federal Reserve started printing their paper money, they were bestowed the opportunity to create laws favoring their beliefs and profits. These are some of the main reasons our politicians and corporations discourage women from bearing the curse by depicting women as barefoot and pregnant. The newest sin of liberalism. They keep instituting welfare, food stamps, welfare housing assistance, welfare tax exemptions, welfare tax credits, welfare tax deduction to discourage work, and thus requiring little to no sweat for the food in violation of Genesis chapter 3. Finally, the law of love has become the law of force, all in the name of equality, which also violates the laws of nature. just like the serpent, always judging Christians and trying to make themselves feel superior to them. And in the final analysis, actually judging God and demanding, in a sense, equality to God. In fact, a superiority to God, as he judged his curses as something to avoid at all costs, even if it means violating the laws of nature and property rights as contraceptionism, homosexuality, baby murdering, and a progressive tax due. Forcing to give to serve others to bring about their communist utopia on earth, which is nothing more or less than institutionalized slavery. The religious left has taxed Americans to death, institutionalized childbirth, all in the name of saving lives, making bearing children expensive, abnormal, and at the same time they have normalized deadly practices like condoms, homosexuality, and other contraceptive devices, which are far, far more deadly than assault rifle and gun deaths in America. It's not even close. Then they make women work through high taxation, promising them an impossible equality in an unjust, naturally unequal, and fallen world. They understand that there are two ways to put a halt to the religious right. One is limit the children, especially the poor, like China does. Highly regulate, tax socialism, and control the people through laws, rules, regulations, including institutionalized hospital childbirth, so Christian women have to work, cannot bear more than one or two children, and yet have to pay for the birth of other children. That's America today. The liberals understand the need to attack Christianity. You have to attack their ability to give birth and rear their children properly. As the large catechism declares, the liberals want to prevent Christian parents from instilling the Ten Commandments, the Creed, and the Lord's Prayer into the young, so that they will receive them with joy and earnestness, practice them from the youth, and become accustomed to them. For it is clearly useless to try to change old people. We cannot perpetuate these and other teachings unless we train the people who come after us and succeed us in our office and work, so that they in turn bring up their children successfully. Thus the Word of God in the Christian church will be preserved. Childbearing and rearing children properly, liberals cannot stand, which is why they try to destroy the family unit. They make money when families are destroyed. They make money when sexual diseases go around and cancer results from them and all kinds of things, and welfare agencies. Their government is corporations today, in which something our forefathers should have never allowed. And corporations have to grow to make money for job security and for good pay. And so that's why the family unit, the nuclear unit, has been done away with, the nuclear family in America. And one of the reasons I discuss it is our marriage licenses. Read what I have to say about that on YouTube. Don't get paid for it. I haven't got paid for it. Okay, I don't get paid for what I write. Thus, Christian women no longer have control over their bodies in America. And so they talk us into being tolerant and inclusive. But since they have taken over the political system, now you cannot even talk about these things, these sort of things in the workplace, without getting fired from your job, fined, or possibly thrown in jail. And a woman's reproductive rights to have as many children as she wants is curtailed today by the micromanaging government agencies, the licenses, permits, required to run a hospital, the requirement to have to give birth in a hospital for a mother, where they perform C-sections all over, left and right on a woman, especially, if they consider you to be less than normal. I've heard so many stories on this. And then ask the poor women on the table and then they still have the gall to ask a woman when she's laying right on the table and giving birth and utter pain right after, can we just tie your tubes now since we have you open? That should be against the law. That's religion, folks. That's unnatural. It violates the laws of nature. That's a religious belief that they're pushing on women in the hospital at such a time like this. Yeah, they're doing it to women prisoners, too. They're tying their tubes. Hospitals should not do this to young women, pushing their social engineering agenda on others. Then the requirement to have your baby in a baby seat the first time you leave the hospital. Then you get in. you have to have a doctor's visit lined up before you even leave the hospital. It's your baby. It's not the government, but the government has taken over. They are the father of our children. We're just, we just pay the bill, so to speak. I mean, we're the babysitters. If that is not enough for a young lady trying to obey the command to be fruitful and multiply, then the government hits you with socialist taxes, forcing you to either go bankrupt or be part of the 60% of the American people living paycheck to paycheck. Margaret Sanger understood that the wombs of Christian women must be controlled. Why? Because the elite understand this is the best way to put a halt to the religious right. High taxation functions to lead Christian parents into sin by limiting the sizes of their families or financially destroys their marriages. Well, they've already, most marriages have been destroyed the moment you sign a marriage license. You know that? Oh, yeah. You're engaged. When you're engaged, you're married. And when you go to sign that marriage license, you divorce God. And you live in adultery with you and your boyfriend from then on. And so many very nice people, civilly very beautiful women, families today, don't realize that they're living in sin and will face the judgment of God. Even the time and a half pay for employees over 40 hours a week has forced women to enter the workplace because most men do not make enough to pay for the bare necessities of life for a family. They've lowered the pay of men in comparison to women, and they got two people instead of one, the corporations, for that reason, this equality, rather than paying the man a living wage and allowing the women to stay home and bear children. And these hospital corporations then force you to pay for other babies than your own through Medicaid babies, becoming the normal way to give birth in America. To paraphrase, and we're all stuck in this system, it's enveloped everyone. Exodus chapter 1 for today reads, "Because the Christian women are not as the heathen women, for they are lively, and the Christian people multiplied and waxed very mighty." This is one of the main reasons socialism prevails in America today, to feed corporate hospitals and their staff a living wage, while the rest of us are barely able to breathe, having to pay for even the babies of illegals. And how did hospital corporations ever get to the point of now, practically speaking, requiring you to give birth in a hospital, which costs about on average about $20,000-$25,000 just to have a baby? In all that physical abuse of C-sections and trying to seduce you to have your tubes tied for their social engineering agenda of one less human footprint. And C-sections are performed, at a high rate compared to nations like Sweden and Norway and Finland and places like that, other nations. And then they have little to say about the 100 or so million babies in America that have been exterminated in the death chambers in our sacrificial high places, just like in the Old Testament, or about our condom-pushing politicians because they want to limit the growth of the average American Bible-believing woman. They won't say that, but a lot of them believe that. But much to say about freeing Muslim nations when we further enslave our own nation with socialism, war debt. Why are we fighting wars over? Why are we giving money to them? There's no reason for that at all other than to supply our corporations that are producing these weapons. We are free. We should be free as a nation to help other nations if we want. Each individual family should be free to give to our Ukraine money. And that's what, when they started, they had websites on from Ukraine. You could give your money. That's a way to do it. Let them buy their weapons at the best price and from the best nation. Isn't that what the Democrats teach? A free market? But somehow it disappears with wars. Okay? We shouldn't have to be forced to help other nations in any way. Just recently I heard where we're giving money to Haiti for flying food over. That should be the responsibility of individuals to give that money to them. Send it through the mail. Send it some way. That's stolen money, taxpayer money that they're given in order to get votes from our politicians. In corporate cancer centers, in corporate hospital centers, everywhere, treating the infected ones with stolen taxpayer monies. That's not the role of a government, to redistribute money to hospitals in any way. No way. It's the American people. One hospital where we live, you can do it freely. You can give and donate. That's the way, willingly. A nation is destroyed with socialism. God will not repay corporations. And he will repay individuals who give willingly. And Scripture points out he will do that at least as much as you've given, but not corporations. Nope. And if America can have more than 2,000 gun laws violating the Second Amendment, almost going on 3,000, should they not have over 1,000 regulating condoms and free sex, which kill more people per year than do guns? 44,000 deaths in 2012 alone from venereal diseases, not including an untold number that have and are dying from various forms of cancer, from HPV, HIV, and other sexual diseases. Condoms themselves have a 20% failure rate. A mere 32,000 deaths in 2012 from guns. And the statistics aren't too much different today. An untold number of lives were in self-defense. And people having them, you never hear about, never included in the statistics, or even die to a thought in the criminal's mind that they might possess a gun, preventing them from even approaching many people. But Vanessa, a teen, writes about oral sex as a leading factor in the throat cancer epidemic in the United States. That those with 6 or more lifetime oral sex partners are 8.5 times more likely to develop cancer of the throat than those who do not practice oral sex, says Dr. Hisham Mahana. Oral sex may be the biggest factor in the rise of oral cancer in the United States, and goes on from there that has been a rapid increase in this type of cancer, a type of throat cancer in the past 2 decades, calling it an epidemic. Where's the health department on this? But they're all what? With COVID, stopping churches from meeting. With all these sexual diseases, an epidemic, and they're not even doing anything. The health departments, they're encouraging, they're passing out condoms, they're teaching, quote, safe sex. In both the United States and UK, and the CDC even admit that. 70% of throat cancer in the United States are caused by HPV, or human papillomavirus. HPV is the most common sexually transmitted infection, with 3 million new cases. This is just that, folks, in the U.S. each year. Many people will live their lives without ever knowing they have HPV, but for some, they pass it on. It can develop into cancer. We only wonder why the CDC wants gun control laws passed, and like they've tried, has never promoted sex control laws in comparative measure. So what is the conclusion of having sex control laws versus gun control laws? Certainly God was against, is against free sex. It appears that he might be against a little bit more sex between, let's say, married couples, in other words, outside of sex, adultery. But there's other types of adultery, which the Scripture points out. That it's the government's role, and that's more dangerous in America, free sex. The government should be, any type of free sex should have penalties to it. And it's against the law of nature, and of nature's God, as the preamble to the Constitution states. They are to protect property rights. It's seen, thieves, they put in jail, right? And it's against the law of nature to steal. It's property rights. And the same thing with having sex control laws. The facts speak for themselves, and the liberals do not want to see it. They want our guns for some reason. There should be no laws governing guns at all. Any type of gun. Guns are a law of nature right, because and thus supportive of the Constitution, which states the laws of nature and of nature's God in the preamble. Plus, they have legal precedents for hundreds of years. There were no restrictions. On the other hand, free sex outside of marriage, which is a form of adultery, folks, has had restrictions for hundreds of years under a Constitution and violates the laws of nature and the very spirit of the Constitution. The laws of nature and nature's God. Common sense, folks, also mandates that free sex, adultery in Scripture, means any sex out of marriage. It includes that. Should have a multitude between people who aren't even married. Should have a multitude of sensible laws governing it. It's common sense. Adultery is 100 times more dangerous than owning an assault rifle. That's true. That means you are 100 times more likely to be a victim of a sexually transmitted disease than to be a victim of an assault weapon bullet. Reasonable sex control laws need to be immediately instituted concerning all birth control. Locks put on condoms at home where children are most at risk. And all sexually seductive movies, suggested songs need to be banned. If they can do it for almost 3,000 laws and guns, this is sensible control, and it's what America is asking. In fact, because they violate the laws of nature, most men won't use condoms on a regular basis. Ask prostitutes. Men don't want them. Ask Charlie Sheen. He begged his girlfriend not to use them when he knew he was infected. Condoms and all sex outside of marriage, they violate the laws of nature and thus the preamble and how our Constitution should be interpreted. In fact, we need to fingerprint and license premarital and extramarital sex and do universal medical background checks on those applying for a sex license. We need licensed and taxed condom distribution, Planned Parenthood, Walmart, wherever condoms are. And extramarital sex needs to be licensed and taxed since it kills thousands more than God. I mean, it's not even close what contraception does in killing human life in the womb and everywhere else. In fact, condoms should be banned since sperm is human life. Some consider this the start of accountability. Others consider sperm killers kill human life, although without an eternal soul. The liberals believe sperm has no practical value, moral value. Having said these things, the liberals need to admit there is a possibility of sperm being a real person or human life in some fashion. America should ban condoms. And if that is not enough, what animal in nature practices sperm control? None. And since it could both be killing human life and violates the laws of nature, contraception should be banned. And extramarital sex should be just for those who are fingerprinted and have a sex permit. Our legislators need to pass many times more sex control laws for every gun control law that has been passed. It's only fair. It's only equal treatment under the modern interpretation of the 14th Amendment. Sex control is needed in every way in America today. In fact, for every one killed by an assault rifle, like I mentioned, there are 100 victims of sexually transmitted diseases that have died. And it is not enough for our government to recognize the validity of marriage licenses anymore, for they encourage sexual activity after a person is actually married in the sight of God through the first promise engagement. Just consider the number of victims of sexual activity during bachelorette parties. Bachelor and bachelorette parties need to be licensed and monitored if our government refuses to recognize common law marriages for purposes of what? Institutionalized greed and control. And you can read what I have to say on marriage licenses. It's only fair, and it saves the lives of our children. Anything that can save one life, as liberalism tells us, should have laws, right? I don't believe that. But this isn't even close. And maybe I'm being a little bit facetious in what I've mentioned, but I'm trying to make a point. American citizens, if they own too many guns, are visited by the local sheriff today. They have in the past. They passed them all over. They had 100 assault rifles. Poor guy. And, I mean, That's constitutional. See, the law of nature, they consider it just like with head coverings for women today. It changes. The law of nature changes. It's always evolving. And so the law of nature doesn't apply today, what our forefathers wrote, because truth changes to them. And so we need to start doing this with those who sleep around and bear too many condoms. After all, why do they need that many condoms? These sexual disease spreading people are much, much more dangerous than owning guns, and they need to have their condoms confiscated by the. In fact, if they get somebody pregnant outside of marriage, and the parents allow their children access to these condoms, they should face fines too. Just like they're doing with guns. They're starting to with guns now. It's more dangerous having contraceptives laying around and their children using it and having sex, in fact, even if they're having sex outside of home. And their parents should be held responsible. They should have to go to possible jail too. No one should be allowed to bear condoms anywhere without a sex permit or license. America needs to fingerprint anyone wanting a condom so they can track any extramarital sex, venereal diseases, which kill thousands more per year. It's not even, I'm talking a lot more, and are much, much more dangerous than guns in America. Guns are a law of nature, as mentioned in the Declaration of Independence. The laws of nature and of nature's God. Whereas extramarital sex, it violates the laws of nature, as seen with venereal diseases, and it ought to be banned even by any nation. The liberals mandate background checks for conservatives, but none for themselves, as we see with disease-spreading condoms and free sex, which are much, much more deadly than guns. For if we can save the life, as they say, of just one child infected with the HIV, it's worth it. And there I'm being facetious again, because, as I discuss in my other videos, but nevertheless there's a truth. Yes, they should be fingerprinted, and the parents should be, if they can hold parents responsible for guns if their child picks it up, so much more for parents who their children go out and they're aware they're having sex. And condoms are a religious issue. Many denominations have statements saying Scripture allows such usage and imply the Bible approves it. We need to get these nutcase liberal Bible thumpers out of our life, for their beliefs and that of the government violate the laws of nature. The modern interpretation of the First Amendment says there is a separation of church and state, and condoms are a religious belief. Condoms have been around for centuries, in fact, go way back. But today, technology, it's gotten rid of God, right? Are being dogmatically preached as the only device that can prevent the spread of disease, including AIDS, unwanted pregnancies. To date, they say over 20 different dangerous sexually transmitted diseases are rampant among the young, and that's true. Add to that the problems associated with promiscuous behavior, infertility. It a lot of times leads to abortions and infected newborns. The cost of this epidemic is staggering, both in human suffering and an expense to society. And even engaging in oral sex is dangerous. Cancer and every sexual transmitted disease can be spread through having oral sex. In what it does to your relationships in a marriage, you look at people who've had sex compared to people who are married to virgins. It destroys marriages. It destroys good sex too. Did you know that? Yeah. The best sex studies are done by people who are married who are virgin. And yet we had to wear masks during COVID when something more deadly was right there in our midst. Right there, right at the time. And our most holy government and the health departments have had nothing to say about this. Figure that out, my dear jury. And are condoms really that effective? Various studies from everyone from Planned Parenthood to the National Institutes of Health show that condoms have a 15 to 30% failure rate for contraception. Folks, there's a lot of money. You talk about the gun industry. This whole industry of free sex, it destroys marriages, puts men as having to, as deadbeat dads who the government goes after. They make all kinds of money off of this. government corporations. Hospitals make a ton of money off of free sex. I mean, it's an industry that makes the gun industry look like a speck in a pail. The Alpha Center reports nobody knows for sure exactly how deadly safe sex is, but we do know that 1 in 5 adolescents using condoms is pregnant at the end of a year. Touting these contraceptive devices as being safe sex or protective sex is unjust. Could you imagine having, these, they ban guns and you can't do anything and even talk about them. Oh, really? You can't have ads on them anywhere. But yet, well, how about contraception? Why aren't thousands and thousands of laws on what they can do? There is an allowed 2% failure rate before they leave the factory. Condoms are foolproof. Yeah. All you have to do is follow the simple directions set forth in a publication from where? The Department of Health and Human Services. HHS lists 13 instructions, including store properly, pay attention to. I mean, this is religion. The government shouldn't be involved in the Department of Health in religion. That's not their duty. Theirs is to protect and uphold the laws of nature. This is a religious belief, contraception. It lists 13, including some store. Pay attention to expiration date on condoms with spermicides. Use a water-based lubricant. Be cautious about vending machines. Are they exposed to extreme temperatures? Don't keep in the wallet or purse for more than a few hours at a time. Don't open package with teeth, sharp nails, or scissors. Check to see if condom is gummy or sticks to itself. Check up brittleness, tears in babies, etc. And be sure your life insurance is paid up. Okay, and it's crazy what is going on in our society, our modern society, thinking they have outsmarted God, done away, and made women equal by doing this to society. I mean, you got whole streets that don't even have a husband on them anymore in every city, in every town, and families have been destroyed. You can't. And on top of that, the HIV is 1/25th the width of a sperm and can pass easily through the smallest gaps in condoms. Researchers studying surgical gloves made of latex, the same material in condoms, found channels of 5 microns that penetrated the entire thickness of the glove. HIV measures 0.1. They offer dubious protection against the HIV virus. The CDC cites a study of 123 Europeans who had sex with an infected partner using condoms over a 2-year period. Not one tested HIV positive, we are told. It neglected to note the genders of these infected. If the women had AIDS and the men did not, chances of transmission would be minimal in any case, it being harder to transmit from a woman to a man than vice versa. So, official reports concerning husbands having AIDS and the wives who did not. 17% of the women contracted the HIV virus after a year and a half. 17%. I mean, that's pretty bad. In short, America needs to get over with their love affair with condoms. And it goes beyond having a love affair with condoms. FFRC points out, and in the case of the rampant and incurable human HPV, condoms prevent no protection whatsoever. Today, 24 million Americans are infected with HPV. Could you imagine? Can you imagine all these statistics with guns today? It's linked to over 99.7% of cervical cancer cases. Hey, the hospitals are making a ton of money, folks. And the average doctor today is liberal. Not only do they want to tie your tubes on the bed, but they also push this stuff. That's where they make money. The number 2 cause of cancer deaths among women after breast cancer. But even after we got cancer centers all over the place, and they wonder why. They know why, but they don't want to tell you why. But even after having the clear and irrefutable facts handed to them, Planned Parenthood refuses to tell Americans that condoms leave millions, quote, unprotected. Even a woman handling a man's underwear during their frolicking can mean the transmission of this deadly virus, which in most cases only a pap smear can detect. Any sexual contact, genital or oral, can spread HPV, and HPV can turn into cancer. Not merely environmental factors have caused an increase in cancer. This is how it's happened. You look through the years and how cancer is, but sexual diseases turning into cancer, HIV and HPV can be the main cause of the increase in cancer rates in America, but the media and the medical profession have little to say about this to the public. We hear a lot about cancer awareness months, but nothing about sexual disease months being possibly the main reason. Abstinence is the only logical choice left. It is. But the liberal establishment will not admit or consider this option. It violates the law of nature, to have sex. Any type of sex outside of marriage violates the law of marriage, and the law should come down hard against people that do this, no matter what age they are. And yes, their parents should be held responsible. If we can hold parents responsible for guns, why not the parents of the children that have sex outside of marriage? Is there just too much taxpayer stolen money? Think of all the socialist agencies involved with women who have babies outside of marriage, and then getting the poor man. Here they are preaching free sex, and then they're going after the young men who impregnate women and attacking him, making him pay child support payments for 18 years, putting many on the street. I mean, it's the same thing with politicians. They're complaining about their sex, but yet our government's passing out condoms in California in schools, and they did it throughout America in the last few years, last 15, 20 years. And in corporate cancer treatment centers to just not support abstinence programs. In the public school system, health education classes are teaching our children what is often sexual morals, and yet the health departments are for gun control. And Nickerson, who is a research associate at the University of Colorado, points out two false assumptions. She says that not planning ahead may simply reflect the nature of adolescent sexual activity, which tends to be infrequent, irregular, and unanticipated. In other words, you're just motivated by seeing a woman, and you have sex, and when you're young. I mean, right? In fact, several studies have indicated that a major reason for the non-use of contraception among adolescents is that intercourse was unexpected. It is difficult to plan ahead for unanticipated events. The sporadic nature of adolescent intercourse, particularly in the early and middle teen years, suggests that the decision to use condoms may be made situationally rather than in advance. Thus, behavioral intentions to use condoms assessed well in advance of intercourse may not have much validity. Well, it doesn't. And you have to teach people, just say no, And when you got pornography all over the internet today, encouraging men, I mean, it's easy to get trapped in pornography. And there's no mercy for men today, allowing it to go on the websites. And no mercy at all, for men. And they don't tell them all the things that are going to happen, And so the second assumption is that condoms and other contraceptive methods are easily and readily available to any adolescents who want to use them. Such is not the case, however. In the current social and political climate, adolescent sexuality is frowned upon. It always has and always will. It's a law of nature. It's against the law of nature. And many persons, the same thing. Women have long hair because it's a law of nature. Men have short hair. It's a law of nature. And many persons believe that the only morally acceptable way to stem the epidemic of adolescent pregnancies and sexually transmitted is to return to traditional values and teach young people to just say no. Securing contraceptive risks disclosure. Adolescents worry about seen purchasing over-the-counter contraceptives or patronizing a family planning clinic. They are fearful that parents or siblings will discover their contraceptive materials. They dread going to family physicians who might reveal their sexual activity to disapproving parents and deliver unwanted moral advice or lectures or simply not help. We all know it's against the law of nature, and so to have sex outside of marriage. It's just, the squirrels even teach us that, they have father and mother, and it's based upon their decision, not a government license to marry. It's a decision, okay? And so, but even if condoms are handed out to the students or readily available in public bathrooms, many will not use them anyway. And if they do, it's like playing a game of Russian roulette. Nickerson points out some reasons. There's a fair amount of evidence that points out some reasons. There's that both adolescents and adults do in fact have negative attitudes toward the consequences of condom use. Relatively large numbers of individuals believe that the condom is ineffective in preventing pregnancy, is likely to rip or tear during intercourse, is inconvenient, unnatural, uncomfortable, and messy, decreases a male's sexual pleasure, is embarrassing to obtain or use, and interferes with the spontaneity of the sex act. One male says it is like taking a shower with a raincoat on. This is seen most clearly with prostitution. The males most frequently do not desire to use a condom and pay a woman prostitute more money to do so. Hubble continues, none of the contraceptive methods currently available is ideal. The perfect contraceptive would be 100% effective in preventing pregnancy, readily available to everyone, inexpensive, completely without side effects, instantly reversible, and easy to use. It would not interfere with lovemaking in any way, and would require a minimum of advice and care from a clinician. There is no such method. Hubble states, among sexually active teens who have had a comprehensive sexuality course, a much larger percentage use contraceptives than those who have not. There you go. Comprehensive is defined as including at least 4 out of the following 6 topics: biological facts of reproduction, coping with sexual development, different kinds of birth control, information about where to get contraceptives, information about preventing sexual abuse, and facts about abortion. And it is a fact that in 1985, only 35% of all teenagers have had a sex education course whose content could be called comprehensive. But the problem is not one of a lack of a comprehensive education. The main question that needs to be answered is how to stop unexpected sex. And obviously, contraceptive education, 3 out of the 6 topics included in a comprehensive sex education course, they have little to no effect on stemming unexpected sex. You do not try to behaviorally change a physically abused wife by telling her to wear a football helmet and pads around the house. Instead, you try to behaviorally change the root of the problem. Parents do this by teaching their children to just say no. But the liberal opposition says, how can you prevent teenagers from having premarital sex since sex is natural? But we ask, why do so many liberals enter marriage relationships? Simply because it is not natural for humans to have sex outside of marriage. Nature, through the many sexually transmitted diseases, teaches us it is not natural to have sex outside of marriage. And this whole thing about government, too, and you need to read what I have on marriage licenses. It's crazy. I mean, you got to get permission from the government to have your child married. Oh, come on! I talk about that in how ridiculous it is. No government should have control over any marriage besides telling your children when they can get married. And so they put off. You got to be 18 years old. So what happens? A certain percentage of young people go out and they have sex, and so they used to get married I'd hate to even mention the age back in before Christ. I mean, right around that time with the Romans and what kind of age they were married at. The boys and girls, and in America, they were married 12 and 10 and 12 years old back in back 150. Back about they were about 12 years old. They were married. A lot of adults, young adults. I'm calling them adults, you know, and so the government's taken over. They define terms. They define when a person's an adult, and so it's destroyed marriage, folks. I mean, here the government's telling them, yeah, you can marry this person, and your parents say, no, you shouldn't marry him. Christians tell their children they got to marry a Christian. That used to be parental permission. They had to basically give it, or if one of the family members if the parents passed on. As pointed out earlier, in the case of the rampant and incurable human HPV, condoms provide no protection whatsoever. This applies also to the spread of the herpes virus. Even premarital, I mean, there's hardly a family in America that doesn't have the herpes virus anymore, passing it on. Even premarital kissing is against the laws of nature, as the herpes simplex type 1 virus teaches us. Thus, we must not treat our teenagers as less than dogs. The base desires of teenagers can be controlled. Just as it is natural for a dog to go pee on your kitchen, it's not natural. Adult owners of dogs nevertheless teach him to go bathroom outside. Likewise, just as natural for a human to go bathroom anywhere, nevertheless humans utilize bathrooms. Let us expect more from teenagers than we do from our own dogs. Social pressure, peer pressure, boys pressure girls into it, is the chief reason why teenagers do not wait to have sex. Peer pressure. Yeah, have you had sex? Weren't you ever asked that question in high school, in college or whatever? Then they go to college. I mean, the women are expected to go to college and graduate. I mean, come on now. They're away from home, from where love is, and they're looking for love in all the wrong places. Over 90% of teenagers today look at pornography. Did you know that? In college? Men and women, well over 90% on a regular basis. Do you think they're going to wait to have sex? In the porn industry, I mean, you talk about it. You compare it to the gun industry. They're both huge. And may we add, and besides all the other industries that are involved in free sex, like I talk about, it's one of the biggest industries, allowing children to have free sex, and the government allowing and encouraging it, then 100 times the gun industry. And may we add alcohol. The wrong assumption is thus made that a comprehensive education can greatly affect behavioral change. This is because unexpected sex is cited by teenagers who have actually had intercourse as the most frequent single reason for not using birth control, according to 2/3 of them. 2/3. In fact, as will be seen, a comprehensive education increases sexual intercourse. Sex educators need to learn from parental experience. Of those parents who have talked with their teenagers about both sex and birth control, 35% engaged in sexual intercourse. Whereas of those parents who merely talked with their teenagers about sex but did not mention birth control, 31% had sexual intercourse. There you have it. This study from Planned Parenthood itself, and if there's going to be a bias on statistics, it's there, shows that talking about birth control does increase the rate of sexual intercourse. It does. And it should be remembered that it is impossible to obtain two completely different control groups for this type of study, simply because teenagers are being bombarded about contraceptives from many areas, radio, TV, etc. Nevertheless, the parental experience shows a difference of 4%. Now, 4% may not seem like much, But consider the amount of tax money spent on these liberal religious programs and the many failures born will be discussed, through contraceptive. Every time you're using contraceptive and you have a baby, that's a failure, folks. And I've heard of young girls, women, and mom told them, we didn't expect you, it's just affected them, the psychology. They're going to treatment centers for that. And remember, thus 4% increase in sexual behavior is from an improved Planned Parenthood program. Yet other programs have shown different results. A program entitled Sex Respect was implemented in East St. Louis among the elementary and middle schools. In the elementary school, the year before Sex Respect was implemented, there were 10 pregnancies. Yet there were no pregnancies in the year Sex Respect was instituted. Among the middle school, there were 44 pregnancies the year before Sex Respect was implemented, and just 10 1 year later with Sex Respect. Now, obviously, they could have gone to a baby murdering clinic, and you can never really trust this, but it goes beyond just getting pregnant, and I mean that's a big issue, but it involves just the cost to society, and I mean, if we can have gun control, folks, I mean, come on, this is a no-brainer, with the cost this is costing our healthcare system. I mean, they're putting up hospitals everywhere in these places because of a good support, a good reason is all the free sex that's happened. Another school which showed a 40% sexual activity rate the year before saw sexual activity drop to 9% with just just say no message. Another school in the inner city saw a rate of 20% sexual activity, and a year later it dropped to 5%, and the pregnancy rate dropped 30%. And the list continues, but there has never, ever been a decrease in pregnancies with just teaching condoms on a continual basis. Yeah, but they might get lucky, in 1 year, and where they went to the baby murdering clinics or something like that. But no, it is true that parents who discuss both sex and birth control have teenagers who usually use contraceptives 42% more often than parents who just discuss sex and no contraception. But let us remember that condoms fail 15, almost 16% of the time. And some groups of women experience up to a 45% failure rate. Teenagers experience an average 18% failure rate, and among the poor, the rate is up to 50%. And these offer little to no protection against the deadly HPV, as discussed earlier, or other sexual diseases. And ectopic pregnancies have increased roughly 7 times since 1970, folks. 7 times ectopic pregnancy, and oh boy. This increase is attributed to contraceptive use other than the pill. Ectopic pregnancies account for approximately 10% of mothers dying in childbirth. And I mean, come on. I mean, that goes way beyond probably gun deaths in America. In and of itself, ectopic pregnancies. Yeah, I mean, it's probably pretty close. I haven't looked at that, but is this reproductive health, though, for women? And consider candidiasis, or yeast overgrowth, that severely compromises a woman's health. Fully 35% of women using birth control pills have cases of this vaginal problem. And many others have less acute yeast overgrowth, compromising their immune system due to this hormonal birth control pill onslaught. Another study shows women who have taken out oral contraceptives for more than 4 years are nearly twice as likely to get breast cancer by age 50 as those who did not use oral contraceptives. Other complications from oral contraceptives include increased risk of thromboembolism, stroke, myocardial infection, liver tumor, gallbladder disease, visual disturbances, fetal abnormalities and hypertension. Boy, a lot of money to be made there by the corporations, right? And spermicides, since they are not always effective at killing human life, sometimes result in deformed babies. Are these reproductive health matters for women today? Or is it just about making the corporations and the government tax money, getting women out working, cheap labor, and also coming after Christian families? And how about male health? The liberals have in the past fooled men with the false belief that masturbation prevents cancer and is therefore healthy to exercise these muscles. But the truth is that when masturbation is taught and therefore practiced regularly, studies have shown among the unmarried priests, in other words, there are higher rates of enlarged prostate and prostatitis problems and therefore cancer rates. Is teaching masturbation healthful too? No. Single males can exercise the inner muscles to protect the prostate through safe ways, through like the Kegel exercise, eating right, taking herbs. There's all kinds of things you can do. Magnetics, for example, putting that on your prostate, a large neodymium magnet, and can be very effective, I believe. And other ways I've heard of. The old adage of use it or lose it has only limited application here. Staying within the bounds of the Bible ensures health, not injures it. Others approve of masturbation because they build up a pressure in the prostate can cause frequent urination. This is false. Given a healthy prostate, no buildup of pressure can cause a perennial problem of frequent urination 2 or 3 times a night taken by itself. Impossible. God did not design the prostate this way. Proper diet and colonic treatments maybe something like that would be effective at easing pressure on the prostate. But like I say, there's other methods too you can look at that are natural. In other words, diet is very important to exercise. In other words, there has to be other complications of disorder to cause frequent urination. Obviously, you're aging too. You can't stop the body breaking down in some ways. In fact, many doctors with clients having prostate enlargement recommend complete cessation of all sexual activity, since this enables the zinc levels in a prostate gland to help overcome an infection. And so, and if you got an infection, some people I've heard use neodymium magnets. They're huge. They'll buy a $200 one. It's maybe a 1/4 inch wide, 3-4 inches in diameter. And put that on the prostate for 15-20 minutes a day in that area. And maybe that can kill infections pretty effectively. I'm not sure. But finally, concerning premarital sex, the reality is that teenagers tend to keep having unprotected intercourse for a full year, on average, before starting any kind of contraception. Now, it must be granted that if all students received a comprehensive education, many more would use them. But Hubble needs to answer this. Why push condom use when research shows that only 40% of sexually active students regularly use condoms in the first place? And this is after exposure to a comprehensive sex education program. In a recent radio broadcast, it was stated in New York City high school, nearly 20 condoms were handed out a week to students. And what about the summer months in rural areas? How can they be handed out them through these immoral socialist programs? Really, I mean, it's money, big money, in allowing children to have sex and the parents not being held responsible. The reasons for not using condoms are seemingly endless and change as circumstances change. For example, among blacks in South America, one of the reasons they will not use them is that they perceive this as white man's attempt to keep their population down, and it may well be. And Greer points out, certainly in tribal societies, there is great reluctance on the part of any one tribe to accept family planning because of the fear of being supplanted by another group. In America, many white skinheads feel the same and are frantically reproducing. And finally, this is why the Muslim population is growing in America and around the Western world at an astounding rate. They reproduce and condemn the use of contraception. Muslims recognize the great missionary possibilities of having many children, while the so-called Christian West is being overtaken. The Western nations are in for a surprise, and the problem lies beyond merely an attitude adjustment. Using contraception is against nature. That's the ABCs. It's the nature of a sexual experience to be revealing. Both partners are, in a sense, being revealed to each other in intimate ways. This is what Scripture means when in Genesis 4 it states that Adam knew Eve, his wife. Sex is a revealing of the feeble parts of our body, a time of vulnerability. All defenses are cast aside in the sexual act, and in that sense, both partners allow themselves to be vulnerable. Condoms are by nature a defense mechanism and therefore contradict the very nature of sex. Because of the fact that condoms look, feel, and act as a defense mechanism, and therefore contradict the nature of sex, they are impersonal and will never be regularly used by the majority of people who crave for personal, non-defensive sex in all the wrong places, right? Say the prolific proselytizers. If your child were in an airplane that was going down, wouldn't you want him to have a parachute, even if it was only 85 or 70% effective? Well, you can say that about guns, assault rifles of all kinds. Bad analogy. Teen fornication doesn't have the inevitability of a disaster in process. Here's a better hypothetical. If your child were able to leap off the World Trade Center, would you, 1, hand him a parachute that opens some of the time and wish him bon voyage, or 2, attempt to dissuade him? Apparently, the CDC and the Joyceland elders would opt for A, with best wishes for a safe landing. And Hubble states the Centers of Disease Control reports that 72% of high school students have had sex by the time they graduate. You know that? And I can't remember, but it's 80% by the time they're 21, if they're not married. And regardless of how we feel about that, it's the reality. Now, if we deny these young people the information they need to prevent sexual diseases and pregnancy, they won't stop having sex, Hubble states. They will just stop having unprotected sex. With AIDS a very real threat today, this strategy condemns many teens to death. Well, Hubble implies that using condoms are protected sex. A bias with not all the facts, as I mentioned. I've gone over all the facts. The Indiana Family Institute update letter informs us a study recently published in the American Journal. It refutes widely accepted statistics regarding the effectiveness of condom use in preventing the spread of HPV or HIV. In the study, researchers monitored 204 heterosexual couples in Brazil in which the man was HIV positive and the woman only exposure to the virus was through her sexual contact with the man. In those couples who reported using a condom in every sexual encounter, a shocking 23% of the women became HIV positive. Those who reported rare condom usage experienced a 48% transmission rate. 48% compared to 23%. And 53% of those who never used condoms became HIV positive. There's hardly any difference there. Despite numerous studies to the contrary, the Centers for Disease Control claim that consistent condom use results in a 1 to 2% HIV transmission. They just don't get it. And they offer little to no protection against HPV. Thus, we see that using condoms are more protected, not safe, not protected sex for the majority of sexually active individuals. And as scientific studies have just earlier indicated, condoms have little effect on slowing down the spread of the HIV virus, roughly a 30% greater chance of survival, hardly safe. The 30% does not take into account the greater rate of premarital sex occurring when condoms are taught to teens, and the 30% assumes they will use them every time. something which is very deceitful over an extended period of time, because using condoms are not only against nature, but it's a revealing time. It's taking away the protection time, right? But sexual activity among teens is frequently unexpected. Are we dogs? Are we to treat our children as dogs? That it's okay for our dog to go pee on the kitchen floor because I gotta go pee right now. We grant that condom use, like the HIV virus, has increased. We admit that, and possibly will continue along with the spread of the HIV virus, HPV, herpes, and other sexually transmitted diseases. But Hubble fails to recognize that our grandfathers and grandmothers rarely had premarital coital sex back in the 1800s. Why was this not the reality with them and all these sexual diseases around today and all the broken marriages? No one with any tax support has a right to preach this is the reality. It's against the law of nature. Any preaching like this is the government taking the pulpit. And it's not them, not their job to wear the white robes. Their job is to protect property rights and anything that violates the laws of nature, especially sex, should have laws on it. In comparison to gun laws, probably 200,000, if not more. It sounds facetious, but that's usually the statistics. I mean, it could be a lot more. The reality, which becomes a self-fulfilling. They're going to have sex. My kid's going to have it. Well, they're going to go out and have sex more often, right? But if you hold them up to standards, and you hold the parents responsible. If a parent tells a child they're stupid. They most likely will end up being stupid. And this is just what Planned Parenthood wants to continue to indoctrinate into our youth, the bad self-image, all for purposes of institutionalized greed, really. Hospitals making money, the prisons making money off of deadbeat dads, the courts making money. But let us give our youth more civil credit, not the civil courts, but civil credit than Hubble and the pyrophylactic proselytizers do. History has proven that premarital sex can be greatly altered, just as it increased. This is scientific proof, because science is based upon observation. So to say this is reality misses the point. As with our grandparents, premarital sexual behavior and not condom behavior can be greatly altered. History has never proven that the majority of young people, besides the majority of everyone else having premarital sex, will begin using contraceptives on any regular basis for an extended period of time. As already explained, it's against the nature of sex for this kind of a religious revival to occur. It has no historical precedence, and as shown earlier, current usage speaks against such a revival. And as seen with HIV, HPV, and herpes simplex type 1 for kissing, the problem goes beyond any type of a religious revival of theirs of increased condom usage. The only alternative, every sexual disease, or almost all of them, if not all, can be passed by kissing. The only alternative is just say no. That's why they wore the head thing over in a ceremony over their face. That this is dangerous. The lips should be also virgins, as far as kissing other men before marriage. It's a family thing, or it's a used to be a Christian thing, because they weren't going around having free sex all the time. In order for the message to be effective, it must not be watered down with taxpayer money. There's a separation of religion and state, folks, in our Constitution, and our government has no right to be pushing religion on people from any direction. We should not condemn our teenagers to be warped to the warped reality that Hubble proposes. Safe or protected sex do not come by passing out condoms, and even if they provided all the protection in the world, the poor cannot afford to buy them. and our socialist government cannot afford to keep passing out condoms. And even if they could, it's unlikely that many will use them, at least not in any extended regular basis. It's a fact that most methods of birth control cost between $5 a month and $20 a month. I mean, I can barely afford my cell phone bill every month. 1/3 of all teenagers say this is too much for them to pay. And with those in poverty being the fastest growing class in America, what about future affordability? I mean, America's going down financially. We're losing it. I mean, where are they going to get? We're going to be like African nations. I mean, we're a third world nation, pretty close to it right now. And school-based clinics are also being widely promoted with plans of many more opening. Okay, there's money. You see all the money going into this? Although they cannot be criticized in many areas, the devil comes clothed in outward beauty, they nevertheless encourage youth who have serious problems to bring these immoral problems to adults other than their own parents. Concerning contraceptive services, while this is no doubt their primary function, clinics also offer a variety of other health services, okay? That's called packing. It's the same thing with marriage licenses. They pack them with goodies, right, in order to get them approved. And the same thing with property taxes today. They pack them with, we need this goes to support the poor and support this and that. It's not only schools anymore. And so by providing a wide range of services, clinic organizers believe they can achieve wider community support. That's what they do, the government today. They're corporations, and they need to grow. Corporations make money, and they need more clients. Regrettably, this underhanded approach to establishing in-school clinics is apparently quite common, and they shouldn't have school clinics like this. I mean, that's not their role, to be involved in growing these type of government corporations. That's theft, stealing taxpayer money for this sort of thing. Regarding school-based clinics, it's a serious infringement on the rights of the parents, even if only listening is involved. There is no such thing as an unbiased passive listener. As the Roman Catholic priest of Meriden, Connecticut had pointed out, school-based clinics are already operating or under consideration in many areas that distorts the values of mutual respect by camouflaging as love what is often really exploitation. In the recent past, sex ed has failed miserably, as Hine points out. The government's subsidy of sex education and family planning swelled from $13 billion to $275 million 10 years later. And we can imagine what it is now. The number of teens and family planning clinics grew sevenfold between 1970 and 1979. Contraceptives and abortion, that's after they got allowed babies to be murdered in the womb. In spite of this Bleitzig on teen pregnancy, it turned out that the premarital pregnancy rate was increasing even faster than the rising level of premarital sex activity. This, of course, was precisely the thing that the government promotion of family planning was supposed to correct. And since 1970, the federal government has spent nearly $3 billion to promote contraceptives and safe sex. This year alone, $450 million of your tax dollars will go down that drain. It's stolen money. We could use our money to give to women who are pregnant and to do freely, to help the neighbor. And that's when God blesses a nation, when we give to help other people willingly and not under force through government corporate. God will not repay any corporation back for helping, even if it's moral, even if it's for a good reason, through their housing assistance and everything. And that's why we're going down as a nation. It's taking God out of the picture and saying this is secular thing. There's no such thing as secular in this world. The laws of nature God create, and He's behind it. And when you violate the laws of nature, you are fighting against God. Also, from 1971 to 1981, There was a 306% increase in federal expenditures on family planning, with a corresponding 48% increase in pregnancies and a 133% in abortions for women aged 15 to 19. Those states with the highest expenditures on birth control showed the largest increases in abortions and illegitimate births between 1970 and 1979. Also, the sex experts tell us that the main emphasis should be on abstinence and only secondarily on how to do it correctly. Insofar as any emphasis on how to do it correctly, orgasms instead of babies comes across. To fail to see a correlation between this and any increase in homosexual behavior and other aberrant behavior would be like failing to see any resemblance between lung cancer and smoking. All aberrant sexual behavior, anal sex, whatever, it's an outgrowth of a moral system which believes that non-reproductive sex is normal. When Scripture, normally speaking, considers a couple to be married to be true virgins, God only approves of virgins marrying, in a sense. That's His will, is two virgins marrying. And so all throughout Scripture, and so many passages of Scripture deal with this. Now let this be noted. The writer acknowledges that there are circumstances when having non-reproductive sex is moral, when orgasms and not babies is okay, as with older, retired, married couples. Here the intent is not against a human life continuing. Whereas older parents cannot have children since they are past childbearing age, many contraceptive users and homosexual advocates religiously believe orgasms and not babies are morally okay, that the intent to pursue non-reproductive sex is fine, at least necessary, because they need to have sex somewhere and somehow. Yet once this type of non-reproductive orgasms, in other words, mentality is embedded in a young teen's morals, a foundation of greater acceptance is laid for any sexual activity. Provided sex does not hurt anyone, they say, and the relationship is consensual and a private affair. Oh boy, here we come with a 14th, right? Sexuality today carries no moral dimension, invoking transcendent questions of right and wrong. In fact, sexual norms are perceived as limitations of a consensual and private affair. It's not private anymore than you going out, somebody coming out with a gun and shooting people. That's not a private affair. It's dangerous. That's why even though guns should have no thing, it doesn't give you a right to go out and shoot any more than just because you have condoms in your drawer, shouldn't you have a right to go out and have sex? It's a dangerous, super dangerous health problem in America. It's way beyond that. Consequently, civil rights activists are seeking to maintain through the legislative limitations in terming sexual preference. And so, the question is, well, and I haven't really thought about this, but should there be laws, against premarital sex? Well, we got all kinds of civil laws, I guess, or criminal laws, or I don't know if they're under the civil code or not, but they're statutes, I think they are, prohibiting certain guns and things like that. And now they're starting to attack the parents. And should there be laws, or should it just be based possibly on results? If someone, what's wrong with turning somebody in who's having sex outside of marriage? That could happen. It's handled after the fact. You don't need laws. Or if you got a pregnancy, then find out who did it, and they should face prison time or whatever. And so you don't need laws, in other words, against a lot of this stuff. But on the other hand, it's so dangerous that it's unnatural. Guns aren't. They're natural. And that they should have maybe some laws, statutes against them. And so, um, on the other hand, it could be handled all after the fact. However, common law would happen. There's better people who can understand that. But anyway, yet since the preaching of contraception does increase the homosexual population, in other ways it does too, and since the spread of the HIV virus is by far greater among homosexuals and drug users, then why is the government pushing their religious beliefs upon us? Contraception and homosexuality are advocated in many classrooms. While most parents would think of sex education in terms of heterosexual activity, the description of homosexual acts and the legitimatization of homosexuality has become a substantial part of many sex education curricula. An estimated 64 to 77% of sex education curricula for grades 7 to 12 discuss homosexuality. And the HIV virus is being spread more quickly by homosexuals. A recent American Medical Association study shows that homosexual youths are 23 times as likely to have a sexual transmitted disease than heterosexual youths. I mean, that's substantial. According to the CDC, only 879 white American males have been diagnosed with heterosexually transmitted AIDS through February of 1992. It goes back a few years, but the gay lifestyle produces, according to the CDC, almost 60% of all AIDS cases. Hollywood is not ignorant of these truths. It is just too morally bankrupt to confront them. Why this false picture? AIDS expert Michael Fumento says the reason is Hollywood's dislike of a politically incorrect disease that targets homosexuals and other minorities. Unable to change AIDS, they fall back on their trade make-believe to suggest that heterosexuals face the same risks as gays coveting in a San Francisco bathhouse. To prove this, the Gutmaker Institute, which is partially funded by pro-baby murdering killing groups, should conduct this type of a survey. The questions to be asked are you a homosexual or a heterosexual? Are you for or against contraceptive use in a heterosexual marriage? Do you believe homosexuality is morally wrong? I doubt whether the majority of homosexuals would be against contraceptive use, and I doubt the majority of individuals against contraceptive use would support homosexual behavior. In other words, teaching contraceptive law lays a dogmatic stance for a greater acceptance of homosexuality, and that doctrine is orgasms and not babies are morally okay. Another study needed to be done is how many 18-year-olds believe homosexuality is morally sinful. This should be done by comparing two samples of students, those who have undergone comprehensive sex education courses which promote contraceptive use, and another sample which has no sex ed classes, including the Just Say No message. Little doubt that a greater acceptance of homosexuality is among students who have been undergone a comprehensive sex education course. A big problem with homosexuals is that they refuse the difficulty of tolerating the opposite sex in an intimate give and take relationship, and I think one of the reasons why homosexuality has come about too is because of the taxation that we're facing in America from our government today, and and the marriage licenses and all the problems once you marry a female that with a marriage license, you're in trouble, and it's just a matter of time for a lot of people to end up in the divorce court. And you marry again and get right back to the divorce with the second marriage because the divorce rate goes up a little. And so you're just feeding the system, feeding the courts and things like that. And so, I'm not justifying homosexuality by any means, but, the male, I mean, we live in basically with a marriage license as in a matriarchal society in one sense. And so they control a marriage. If you don't get along with them and you have children, you just better keep your mouth quiet and wait until they're 18 years old. And so, the men are just being daggled around, and marriage licenses are unnatural. and I deal with that in marriage licensing online here. It's one thing to have close women acquaintances. It's quite another to be engaged in a marriage relationship. Some in society are promoting homosexuality because they say genetics has proven homosexuality to be inherited. We condemn any belief that says infants are born gay. Some men are less masculine, other men, but no one is born a gay. They have no scientific proof to prove this except their own junk science. In fact, truly scientific studies, observation, have proven that homosexuality is a learned behavior. Just such an example is the fact that children are born without a father present in the home are more likely to become homosexuals themselves. If children are born gay, such a discrepancy between social groups would not be there in the first place. And Otten writes, and this editor was in Africa in 1971. Missionary Lonnie Sparks had just completed creating an alphabet and written language in order to translate it, and he told me that this tribe had no word for this sin. They did not know what it was. Interesting, it is not, that if people are born that way, none in this tribe of 400,000 had been born that way. Don't believe that lie. That's enough for today. I do have enough for more, and another one or two videos, but I want to get to the baby murder next time and show you in so many ways, and I didn't even cover all of them, that unborn babies, they can go to hell, and those in the infants in the womb or just born. And so we're going to look at that in just baby murdering clinics in all ways. But this is far more dangerous. Contraception, it's all behind closed doors at your own homes. There you have to go to a clinic. This happens much greater with certain contraceptives that kill. Not they all kill human life, but eternal life, a lot of them do too. And have a good day. Bye.